On Thursday morning, we talked with Iowa State Extension livestock economist Shane Ellis. It was a big day for grain markets, one in which September corn reached above $8 a bushel and September beans surged above $17. While the current drought will impact supplies in the future, we started by asking how the rise in grain markets would affect livestock producers.
Well, I think it's going to continue to put a pretty tight pinch on our producers, and it's just keeps getting tighter and tighter. For the foreseeable future with this crop, there may not be a way to get away from the high price cost of feed. That growing season's getting pretty tight. And so if we're looking for any alleviation in those feed prices, it probably won't happen in any time soon. We'll expect that pinch to continue to hold down on those producers all the way through this year, keep things pretty tight for them and keep profitability a bit on the elusive side.
Right, with that sort of negative gloom over it, what advice can you give to producers who have to use this as a feed source?
Well, sometimes the best thing you can do is try to still control those costs as much as you can. Not always will there be a profit to be locked in ahead of time. And in this situation, it depends on how much risk you're able to handle and also looking at those margins. For some of our producers, there may be an opportunity where they can lock in something perhaps close to break even if they're using alternative feed sources, but it takes some careful planning and to lock those sort of prices in. I think that a lot of our producers are in a situation where they may not see a return to black ink for some time unless they've already had some things locked in ahead of time. It's one of those situations of, is it going to get worse? It possibly could. Is it going to get better? Not a lot of people are expecting that right now, just looking at the current conditions.
In February, we talked in West Point, and we had looked at the summer outlook, and we knew that cattle supplies were going to be tight. With the drought we're seeing right now, what does that do to supplies for the foreseeable future?
It'll be kind of an interesting effect that we'll see in the end on our feeder cattle supplies. We're seeing some feeder cattle coming into the feedlots that were going to be stocker cattle. They're coming off a little bit early, so we're seeing those light placements already, particularly in the states such as Colorado, places where feedlots bought stocker cattle, put them on stocker range, and they've had to pull them off early just because of the drought conditions, and they're placing those a little bit earlier in their feedlots. And so that will have an effect further out once we get into the fall time. We're going to have some very tight feeder cattle supplies out there. And while they're tight, at the same time, I don't know that that's going to equate to record high prices or increasing prices just because that feed price that's out there. Our feeders are very careful about what they're paying for feeder cattle right now just because of the tight margins.
For consumers, Shane, how high could it get when they go to buy meat? Is that something that we need to be looking at now and knowing that it could get kind of ugly?
The consumer continues to be very sensitive to their financial or perceived financial situation. That's kind of the story we've been seeing for the coming years. I think that it will continue on. Consumers have had a little bit of a pushback on that price threshold that's out there, not going to the meat counter quite as much or buying the same quantity just because of the prices that are out there. We offset that, or we can counter that by featuring beef at the meat counter, but a lot of our retailers are finding that hard and difficult to do with that high price of boxed beef.
One of the boosts we saw in the markets this week was supposedly because of Japan and Japan easing restrictions on beef that they're importing. Just outline what that is and what that might mean, Shane.
Well, what they're considering doing is changing the rule that they have, limiting the beef that can be taken into Japan to animals that are under 20 months of age. They're looking at easing that. Hopefully it'll occur this year. If I were to estimate, it would be at least 2 to 3 months out before they make that change official. There was talk of this coming through even starting last fall, so it's something that we've kind of been anticipating. It looks like we're getting a little bit closer to that happening, and that will definitely improve the ability to get beef into that market. We're expecting it to continue to increase just because we'll have much more beef that will qualify to enter into Japan. But of course, it still has to, there's still things that have to be ironed out before we see that have a full impact. But it's definitely a bullish improvement in the market, and we'll take all the extra demand that we can get.